would like to turn it over. And as I understand, our President Claire had welcomed everybody already. So I'll turn it over back to our Chairman, John Duenas.
So Peggy, I have a question. Are we, is the first part of the agenda to have the candidates, give them 2 minutes to make their opening remarks before we get into the questions? Yes. So, Senator Moylan, I know this is kind of backwards, but unmute yourself and tell us who you are, why you're running.
All right, thank you. Backwards, forwards, let's go. Let's just do this. So, I'm James Moylan. I enjoy being called Jim, so please call me Jim. I've been in my first term as the 35th Guam legislature, but prior to that, I've had a couple of decades of in the insurance industry and financial service industry, and I was even a small business owner for a while as well. I had employees too. So coming from being an employee and running my own business, and then I also had a government service at Department of Corrections for 7 years as a parole officer. And I have 2 grown children as well. So I kind of get, I think with that experience, especially with my grown daughters, I'm kind of ready to serve the Guam legislature because you never know what's going to happen. So, but I think with the vast experience that I have and my role as my record as in the 35th Guam legislature, I'm wanting to serve once again in the 36th. So I'm bringing that to the table, and I think I've introduced several measures. A few were fortunate to get passed into law, and I have a lot more that I want to do for the community. So I'm looking forward to serving once again and sharing my experience with the people of Guam. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Next on is Frank Bloss, who used to be a senator. So, Frank.
Well, good morning, John. Good morning to the organization. Thank you for the Association of Realtors for giving us this opportunity to be able to speak to you. My name's Frank Bloss Jr. I've been over the last 4 years back into the private sector as the president of our Family Insurance Corporation, Frank Bloss and Associates. The reason why I'm coming back in is that with prior experience in both the executive and legislative branch, and then coming back into the private sector, I found myself on a number of occasions saying, what are they doing? Recognizing and knowing what the processes are and how government works, how the legislative process works. There are many times I found myself in the positions of, okay, there should have been more thought in this. And as we look at what is happening to us today in our community, more specifically the pandemic, there's an recent article, or today's article in Guam Daily Post, about the need to be able to move our economy. And us in the private sector have noticed that movement had to have been started since way back in March when you're just dealing with this pandemic. Obviously, there were other things that we could have done earlier. And it was very frustrating over the months to see that there has been no movement. We have an economy that, according to, is characterized by one individual as being shattered. We have predictions from the economists that the recovery, our economic recovery, won't come around or won't come to fruition until about 2022 or 2023. We have thousands of individuals on this island that can't wait until 2022 or 2023, are just hoping or trying to find ways to get past today. And for that reason, I felt the need and the desire to want to come back in and help to contribute. I have some ideas on being able to help our economy recover. But also, just as important is, I'd like to be able to put trust and confidence back in our community, most especially in the leaders that we have. And I think that over the last few years, most especially over the last few months, that's been lacking. And that's something that needs to be desired. There's a sense of apathy that's in our community. There's a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. I want to bring the help and the hope back in. I want to help to bring the trust and the confidence back in. I want to be able to help to move this economy. Guam can do it. We can do better this. I've said it before, I'll say it again. We may be down, but we're not done. And with your help in being able to provide me a seat in the 36th Guam legislature, I can help to do that. Again, thank you very much. My name is Frank Bloss Jr. I'm number 4 on the Republican side of the ballot. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Next will be the sometimes referred to as the other governor. Ken, you're up.
Thank you very much. As you know, I have been a community advocate for 12 years. I've been standing up for the people of Guam before 3 different administrations, 4 different legislatures, numerous government agencies, boards, and commissions, standing up for the people, because the people, frankly, have been too busy trying to keep their noses above water to attend these types of events and hearings themselves. I do this out of a sense of duty because I moved back to Guam in '07 after a career in business that exceeded my wildest dreams. And I was successful in the mainland at mainland level competition because of the education I got paid for by the taxpayers of Guam. I came here originally from Okinawa. My dad was in the service. I came here from Dodea, Okinawa, and now we look at Dodea as one of the gold standards for education. I came here, Guam's education system back in '67 was so far ahead of Dodea that I had to stay back. But as a result of that education, I've traveled the world. I've worked in the top circles in my field, working with national and international corporations. And my community advocacy brought me to the public hearing room, standing up for the people of Guam. As a senator, I'm going to take that community advocacy and that sense of duty I felt for these past 12 years to the floor of the legislature and continue standing up for the people of Guam, but doing so in an area where I have more influence on the outcome of policy than I did as a community advocate in a public hearing room. From hearing room to session hall, it's a whole different level of ability to serve, and that's why I'm running.
Thank you. I believe that Vincent Borja rescheduled for tomorrow.
That's correct.
Okay, that's correct. Okay, so next will be Dominic Hernandez. I don't think I know you, Dominic, but
It's okay, sir. Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me to this. I'm Dominic J. Hernandez. I'm number 3 in the ballot under the Republican Party. I mainly come from being a common person. I served 4 years in the Marines from 2006 to 2010. From there, when I first came back to Guam in 2011, I did work with financial security. Shortly, I started my own business for a few years, 2013. And then the last time I was working at, currently employed in Senatorial. With that understanding, well, I'm on PUA myself, so everything going on, I understand from the personal perspective how
Dominic,
frustrating.
you're cutting in and out. I don't know how to correct that.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Coming from the common person's perspective, I understand how it feels because I'm on PUA myself. It's frustrating, it's scary, and you worry about what's going to happen. And that's what motivated me to run, to try to not only help rebuild the economy and get things back in order with our government, but to also have the perspective of the common person within the Senate itself. As history is showing that at the beginning of the U.S. history, a lot of people that were serving in our Senate and Congress were just regular, everyday. They were there strictly to be public servants and then went about their business after a few years. And that's where pretty much I'm coming from, is to be a public servant and give the perspective of being a common person and what we have to deal with on a daily basis, and hopefully be able to achieve the goals we need to achieve to be able to make everything better for everybody overall.
Thank you, Dominic. You call yourself a common person, but you were in the Marines, so you're not all that common. Thank you very much, and thank you for your service. Next, Tello. Hi, Tello. Senator.
No worries. You can always call me to Uncle John. But buenas and Hafaday. I'd like to thank Gar for this opportunity today to talk to your members about who we are. And I really think this is important, these interviews, because it's important to know who you're voting for and what they stand for. And so I'm here today asking Gar for your support to serve in the 36th Guam legislature. As you know, I've been in the 35th Guam legislature, and it's been an honor and privilege to serve the people of Guam. You know, my priorities has been the hospital, building a new hospital from day one, as well as trying to grow our economy, and definitely transparency. I've been one to call out individuals and on their job ethics and work, and I've never been afraid to do that. My slogan, "Tell it to Tello," has always been true to form. I've had it also in the 30th Guam legislature. So if you have an issue, then you tell it to Tello, and you should expect results because I will provide it. I might not always get what you want, but I definitely will take all my efforts and energy into ensuring that your concerns are heard. A lot of times during public hearing, people will call me up wanting to ask questions during a public hearing. And I'll do that regardless if it's difficult questions or put people in, you know, uncomfortable positions. But I've always said I've been the voice of the people, and I will continue to do that. Not afraid to ask those hard questions. So I've also introduced legislation that even though it's not moving, it's very difficult when you're in a super minority to get legislation through. So I've worked with GAR, for instance, on the rates for power, fairness for power for people living in condominiums and apartment buildings. Unfortunately, the pandemic has kind of put some brakes on there, but we're continuing to work through it. And that's just some of the stuff I've done. And there's a lot more. Why am I running again? Well, there's so much more to do. I've introduced about 31 bills. 11 of them have passed the legislature. And there's so much more I can do. I think I'm effective, and with the good grace of the people of Guam, with their vote of confidence, I'd like to serve again and humbly ask for your vote. I'm number 11, and thank you again.
Thank you, Tello. Next will be Mary Torres, who's no stranger to the legislature. Hi, Mary. I know your brother very well.
Yes.
So you're on deck.
I think you know your vice chair as well very well, who's also my son-in-law. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Mary Camacho Torres, and I'm one of the few that have had some tenure in the current legislature. I'm serving my third term right now as senator. But prior to that, I also had a lot of experience with the government of Guam as the Deputy General Manager of the Guam Visitors Bureau. I was also the first executive manager of the Guam Airport, the first female, and also the General Manager of the Port Authority of Guam. Prior to that, I had 15 years experience in law office management with a private law firm on Guam. In addition, I also want to note that I have also, my extended family also has real property development. So I'm well aware and sensitive to the issues and the struggles that the GAR members also encounter. Throughout my term in the legislature, I've built a lot of policy that rebuilds families, removes barriers to opportunities, and also restores dignity in the workforce, in healthcare, and also in leadership. And I humbly ask for your support. You know, at this time, especially during this pandemic time, we really need level-headed leaders who are well-seasoned, compassionate, and empathetic. You know, people like myself who just do the honest work. You know, I'm not a screamer, I'm not a headliner, but I'm very much in the trenches and very much well-connected to all the issues in the community. As a 41-year-old bride, I mean a 41-year bride, and a grandmother to 10 grandkids. So well vested. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Torres. I guess what we'll do is Senator Moylan has already gone through the first question. So I will just go down the line and ask the other candidates in order, the way I have it here, in order to respond to the first question. I already read the first question. If you want me to read it again, I will do so, but that's kind of cutting into time. So unless you want me to read the question, Frank, you're up.
Yeah, I apologize for being one of the tardy ones. And yes, I need to ask you to repeat the question.
Okay, well, the question is a real estate related question, and it is a question about whether, let me read the whole thing. The governor's office has upgraded the classification of real estate as an essential service during COVID-19, condition of readiness, operating restrictions. However, GovGuam agencies that are part and parcel of the entire real estate industry remain either closed or inactive. The real estate industry that, as we define it, is that industry that encompasses not only private sector real estate activities, but it also includes government of Guam agencies that are involved in the processing of real estate transactions, including taxation, recordation, and management interaction, construction, and land use permitting, building inspections, building occupancy, and document recordation and escrow and the like. And the question is, will you support the preparation and passage of legislation to classify the whole of the real estate industry, encompassing both the private sector and related government of Guam agencies as true essential services?
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm very familiar with this, with the question now. First off, prior to running for the legislature and being part of the legislature, I was Guam's first Homeland Security Advisor. And in that role, we had to be able to define, in a lot of cases, the not just the response, but the recovery of an affected area in the time of a disaster. And when you're talking about wanting to get back, bring the economy back to where it was at, you've got to look at a number of the industries and a number of the agencies, a number of the services that need to be provided, albeit, and that's just absent any strong wind, rising tide, or in the case of unknown spread of a virus. Once you get past that part, there's got to be this systematic way of bringing the government or bringing the community back. A lot of times, one of the things that really bothers me a lot of times is that we've somehow defined that the community has to get back on its feet when the government decides to get back on its feet. And it's the other way around, quite honestly. The government should actually be in a supportive role to help the community get back. And I agree that the process and what needs to happen in the area of real estate investment and transaction is a vital part of it. That's part of the economy. That's the economy that needs to get back and the economy that needs to grow. And I'm sure that we're not asking that in times when everybody is supposed to be at home, when everybody's supposed to be hunkered down, that we continue to provide this opportunity. Is that when we can provide a safe place, not just for the people that we work with, but the people that we have to, that are consumers, that are our customers, that are our clients, when we can ensure and provide that safety measure, to a very good degree, then we should be allowed to be able to come back in and be able to work. I have to agree with you again. As an insurance agent, it was very difficult in our times that you were going to say, well, as the island is going to go back on, you can go to the stores and you can go to You can go to the beach provided you're by yourself, whatever it may be. You can go to different places, but insurance agencies, you got to stay shut. Insurance brokerages, you got to stay shut. And so the question was, okay, so does that mean that we're going to be confident that there's not going to be no accidents? There's going to be confident that there's going to be no need for an insurance policy should something occur? And when it does occur, who are they going to go to? Well, in the case here of real estate, again, life has to continue to go on. I mean, there's such things as mortgages and rents and other processes, okay, that I hate to say this, but you and I are in the same boat. Banks don't say, okay, because you were shut down, you don't have to pay. What's even more, okay, is that when the government says, although you're shut down, you still have to pay the taxes. Well, if you give me the opportunity to earn a living so I can pay the taxes, maybe that can be done. So yes, I agree. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we do have a time limit, and I know that a lot of you could talk on and on, so because you have a lot to say. Anyway, so the next person would be Dominic. Dominic, you don't need for me to read the question, so.
No, so we're good on the question. So I agree that.
Oh no, I'm sorry, Dominic. I'll have you continue. Ken, I'm sorry, but you'll be next. Is that okay with you?
That's fine with me.
Okay, Ken.
I would not support any legislation to make any agency or department of government Guam special.
I understand that. Can I get back to you? I kind of interrupted Dominic.
Okay.
You were supposed to be next, but that was my mistake. So Dominic, sorry to cut you off, but
It's
you can
okay.
continue.
Yes, sir. So I do agree that real estate should be considered essential. And if we are going to consider it essential, you have to open up all aspects that relate to it. A lot of things, especially during this crisis, at least to me, just didn't make sense. You can have drive-throughs, fast food restaurants, they're open, but then, you can't buy underwear and socks. So there are a lot of things that really didn't make sense to me. And with the real estate industry in particular, it doesn't make sense to me to say that it is considered essential, that it should be open, but then you close government agencies to be able to process certain paperwork or to get certain records. There is many different ways, especially because of technology, to be able to do everything within a safe manner. I mean, we have Zoom meetings, we have WhatsApp, regular telephone conversations, so many different ways we can speak to one another, email each other, send paperwork back and forth, do what we have to do in order to still continue pressing on with our economy and have the ability for agencies such as the realtors to be able to continue selling houses, leasing out properties and so forth. Because at the end of the day, while the tourism industry has been the biggest hit economically, there are still other things going on economically that haven't been hit as hard and continue to do business even during the crisis. So we still need to keep those channels open so that people have the ability to be able to press forward and move on, especially during the crisis, and make some kind of a living and survive through everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dominic. Ken, you're up now. So
Okay, and in my opinion, I would not support any legislation making any one government of Guam department or agency more critical than any other Guam department or agency. What I would do instead is I would introduce legislation modifying the governor's power to declare emergencies to 2 weeks. And then from that point on, it would be with the advice and consent of the legislature to extend it beyond the 2 weeks. Because all we have to do is look at how this current round of lockdowns has been executed, that we see that it was done more on the basis of who you know than it was for public safety. And for that reason, I am in favor of limiting the governor to a 2 week for any emergency, and then having the legislature approve any extensions. So that way all the government and all the businesses will be treated exactly the same.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Tello, I think you're up next.
Thank you, John, for that question. And I think, yes, I would support legislation to try and ensure that there's a smooth process with the real estate agency as far as title, you know, being able to record title, documentation, anything with the ARC to put in place. If you recall, one of my first bills I introduced was about the ARC with all the agencies to be able to approve within a timely fashion projects that are coming forward. And the bill passed, but unfortunately the governor vetoed the bill, I guess because we tagged on a $1,000 fine for agency directors who don't stay within that 30 days. I mean, time frame, it costs money the longer people wait, and investing. I've also introduced legislation to take away the 5-year lease agreement that the government, anyone entering into the government of Guam to lease property. I eliminated that and I have a bill out that will increase it to 10. And GURA of all, not GURA, but GITA of all agencies are actually asking for 20 years. So I think it's very important, you know, that we also remember that we, you know, what are brought on by the unprecedented, you know, issue with this pandemic. And I think as Dominic mentioned, I want to say Senator Dominic Hernandez, he's a good guy, smart guy. And he mentioned technology. And then this is the opportunity that we can really utilize technology and benefit from it. I think we're seeing a lot of technology being used today that's actually enhancing and providing not only transparency, but public hearings. I'm finding out there are more people now coming to meetings through Zoom versus coming and showing up. You'll find more people there. So definitely technology is something that we need to go forward. But other than that, I thank you. Yes, and I would support something that provides a smooth process.
Thank you, Tello. Senator Torres, you're up. There you go.
Thank you. We certainly need to ensure that at the very least, the Department of Land Management is open and accessible so that any transactions that are previously approved will continue in any emergency situation. And of course, the need for housing and the movement of businesses is also critical even during an emergency. But what I want to highlight though is we had a Public Law 3315, which authorized the use of electronic signatures and documents in government transactions. And early in the pandemic, the start of it in April, I wrote a letter to the Department of Land Management director asking him what the status was with regard to electronic recording systems to allow, you know, transactions to continue. In addition to that, I also introduced legislation that with regard to the remote online notarization, which I think was one impediment to getting a lot of transactions done. I think what's critical during this pandemic or in any emergency situation is if we have the technologies in place and the policies to allow for electronic transactions, there's certainly a way for business to continue as usual. And we have, as I mentioned, Public Law 3315. We have the remote online notarization bill that hopefully will see itself to the agenda this coming session, hopefully. But you know, I think at the very least, what we've got to do is rely on electronic transactions more, and then that would enable real estate to continue business as usual, even during times of lockdown. So I would focus on those policies more generally as a senator.
Thank you, Senator. So we move quickly to the second question, which is really related, but specifically addresses the Planning Commission process. So let me ask, or let me read the question and then give you a little bit of a quick background as to why we asked the question. The Guam Land Use Commission processing system has been rendered inactive by GovGuam COVID restrictions with no apparent urgency to restore the system to full operation. The estimated value of development projects currently awaiting Department of Land Management and GLUC action since March, and has been queuing since March, is $2 billion. That, if you sum up the value of those projects, it adds up to $2 billion. Will you support the classification of the GLUC application processing system critical to improving Gulf Guam's economic well-being as an essential service during the COVID-19 condition of readiness operating restrictions? And I think I just moved to Senator Moylan to continue his discussion on real estate related questions.
2 billion is an enormous number and we should be open to take care of these transactions today. Again, it goes back to Adelup, right? Of course, we can do some legislation, we can fight this and everything, but Adelup can open up this up today and get these government agencies whatever they need, plexiglass, protective, personal protective equipment, all that, all available through the CARES Relief Fund. So, you know, legislation, of course, I'd be more in favor of doing such things, but it is essential. If we're going to create jobs, we're talking about $2 billion. Of course, that's going to create jobs, right? There's construction to be done. There's transactions to be made. There's GRT to be done. Employee taxes to be earned as well. Everything we need right now with to get taxes on a $2 billion projects worth of projects will be enormous for our economy that we desperately need today. We should be screaming to Adelup to say, hey, let's get it going. You know, it'd be nice if we can wait for the 36 Guam legislature to get these things done. But in the meantime, I've already, I've written to the governor. I've asked her to open these agencies up, like the Guam Land Use Commission and other essential agencies just as well. This waiting game and determining which agencies should be open or not open, it can't go on. It can't continue this way. So it's a must that we get it going. You know, I've even, when we first got into this pandemic, the legislature was shut down. I went outside and I picketed in front of the legislature and said, let's open up. We're essential. Unemployed people need to have you know, some answers to this, and we got to do something. So I'm saying we can do things now today, and yes, I will support the real estate industry as essential agents, as an essential companies for our island to rebuild our economy. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Senator. And before we go to the next, before we go to Frank to answer this question, I just want to give an example of this, the Planning Commission dilemma. There are applications before the Planning Commission now for worker housing that is being built to house workers to support projects on the bases, military bases. And the worker housing conditional use application is dead in the water. I'm telling you that those workers are gonna show up on Guam and they won't find any worker housing. And what's gonna happen is they're gonna look for apartments. They're gonna go into apartments. Apartments have restrictions on numbers, so they're gonna take a lot of apartments up. And before you know it, apartments aren't available to lease to our citizens. So that's one of the issues before the Planning Commission. So, Frank, you're up.
Well, yeah, I have to agree. There's a systematic problem, and this whole exercise that we're going through right now has been an exercise in a lack of planning or not carrying out the plan. Yeah, I find it quite interesting that, I don't know if you know this, that prior to our island being shut down and prior to us going through this, through these pandemic restrictions, there was a whole exercise that the government had conducted 2 weeks prior to it actually happening. And so the question first, and it was an exercise in a plan that already existed. Why do I know the plan existed? I wrote the plan. And that plan, and in that plan, that there's a review process that they were going through at that time. So the question was, okay, and you were going into this whole pandemic response, and so what plan are you using? Because they said they didn't have a plan. Yes, they did. And part of that plan is getting the services and getting the community back up on its feet when it can. Not to say that we're not done with our pandemic response, not to say that we're not done with dealing with the medical issues, but I think that it's safe to say that we know a lot about coronavirus, about COVID-19 today than we did back in March. And as we progress and as we learn these things, we should get back into getting back up on our feet. And part of that process is in the transaction, is in the real estate industry, and is in the process of how do we use our land. And government should be there to be able to assist community and get back in, not dictate when community is going to start up. And I think if we shift that role, if we turn that around, so that it becomes more responsive to the community instead of the community responding to the government, we can actually deal and resolve a lot of the issues that we have.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. I'll get back to the original order. Ken?
Well, I wouldn't introduce any special legislation for the same reason, but I think we're looking at something different here. What we need is for the Guam Association of Realtors to stand up the way the bishop stood up, because right now the churches were shut down, the bishop stood up. When the roadblocks were in place restricting travel by all residents of the island, I filed a lawsuit against the governor in federal court, and the roadblocks were knocked down the day before our public hearing. What you're talking about here are essential, critical things. They can't wait until January or February to start moving. And I think that if the Guam Association of Realtors stood up the same way we see restaurants standing up, the way we saw the church standing up, the way we saw Guam Citizens for Public Accountability standing up for things that make sense in a pandemic. And this is a project, these projects, they need to move ahead. It makes sense that if we need to get the governor to act on it, but the governor's not going to act without any pressure. And we have seen time and time again during this pandemic that anytime a public interest group applies pressure, then the governor will modify their conditions of operations. And I don't see the Guam Association of Realtors or the construction industry waiting till March, April, or May for something like this to happen. I think you guys need to organize and make it happen now, because legislation isn't going to do it. As we see, the governor is more than willing to ignore any legislation under her emergency powers that she feels that she doesn't want to pay attention to, including procurement. If she's willing to break the laws on procurement, why would she follow a law that says she has to do something here? I think public pressure from GAR would be more effective than the members of the 36 passing a bill in March or April that she'll just veto.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Dominic, back in order.
Thank you, sir. Yes, something like this. $1 billion.
Dominic, I don't know why your mic is cutting in and out. Maybe if you could just, I don't know what you could do. Maybe not move your head around so much, because it seems like when you move, it cuts out. So we want to hear everything you have to say.
Okay, sir, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I do agree with passing something like that. I mean, $2 billion, that's a lot of money, especially in times that we're in right now with the crisis and everything else. Don't get me wrong, I understand that the public health emergency is still going on. The virus is still out there, and I'm not trying to downplay the virus or say that it's not real or anything, because it is real. However, we do have to press forward with things. We do have to get these plans pushed forward so that we can go ahead and predict dates and do what we need to do, so we can plan out things, so we get an idea of where we are going economically versus just sitting in shelter, waiting around, hoping that Adelude does finally open things up or decides to open up so that the realtors can press forward with their project. And as well, just like I said, apply pressure. And I believe that would also help on that end as well to apply the pressure. Realize just how important these things are and why we should press forward with versus around waiting. And at the end of the day, it is that way. The government is supposed to assist the community, as Frank said, and not dictate it. And that's the problem we have right now. And that's what we need to face towards to be able to get these things going, is getting the government to assist the community versus being the one to dictate and tell the community when certain things can or can't happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Tillo?
Vanessa, thank you so much for that question. And, you know, again, it's important that we listen to the advice of the health experts out there regarding the coronavirus, and that we all stay safe. Even though the younger generation, you know, feel that they may be immune to it, they're not, especially if they go and they visit their parents or their grandparents. So I think that the importance of technology too is, and integrating technology, this is the opportunity. We're finding out that we're able to do quite a bit of things right now through technology. I think the process is what needs to be readjusted. And like I mentioned earlier, creating the ARC bill that I created to provide a process that is in a timely manner is so important. And I think, you know, if I didn't realize, John, when you mentioned that about the housing issue with regards to these workers coming onto Guam, because we are now going to be tipping the very height of this military buildup in 2021. And speaking with Department of Labor, Greg Massey, about a year and a half, no, actually about 3 years ago, because I was working at GITA and working with military buildup with Bob Chrysostomo at the time. And this was an issue, but we were starting to see companies like Cortec, as well as, I believe, can't remember that one other company, that were trying to get these housings built up in Harmon, Cliffline area. And moving forward, I didn't know there was an issue. I'm definitely, this is good. It's a great takeaway because I'm learning something here today. Thank you so much. So I will be looking into that as well. But technology and keeping safe, we can do this. Legislation to smooth the process is definitely what's needed. And we definitely need the input of everybody in the community to put that through. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Senator Torres?
Thank you, John. You know, the question actually brings a lot of grave realities about what has happened during the lockdown. The fact that the Guam Land Use Commission application process has been rendered inactive and that so many projects are waiting in the balance is something that we have to address. And I would support having GLUC being an essential agency that has to continue its work. I mean, the fact is, time is money, and any delays always results in a loss of money or added cost to any real estate development or any development project on Guam. So we have to be cognizant of that, but most especially during this time when we're focused on recovery, economic recovery, those things can't be dealt with till after. You know, there's no such thing as restart later. It's always got to be a continuous process. It always has to be a continuous effort. So definitely it has to be prioritized. But you know, the fact that we're at a position where nothing is happening is quite alarming, even to you know, the average person who is still in the process of, for example, trying to build a home or trying to renovate something or, you know, develop a little bit of land. I mean, those projects take so much effort and so much time, and we can't delay progress. It only hurts us more in the end, especially when we're trying to recover.
Okay, thank you. And I think just to wrap up the two questions, I wanted to say that the reason GAR has brought this issue about preparing legislation to address the real estate industry as being an essential service is because there are, three co-equal branches of government, and it seems that that the only way to break this deadlock in getting our economy started to the extent that we can continue to practice safety and distancing and all that is to actually have one of the co-equal branches of government take up the issue. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to, I believe, the next series of questions would be Marcel or Claire to ask the question, and that would be under the category of general government. Peggy?
Yes, actually, if everybody doesn't mind, I think it's time for us to have that promised 7-minute break, our first break for the top of the hour. And it's almost 10. It's a 9:59 and a half. So let's all reconvene at 10:07.
Thank you. Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you all.
Don't be so sad. Just think you have to do this only once every 2 years. Right, Dominic? Better you than me. Been there, done that.
Yes, sir.
But we're looking forward to having you guys lead this new legislature.
Well, thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to hopefully be a part of it.
Yeah. Listen intently to the questions and hope that you can support the realtors, number one, support the economy, number two, and get some good bills passed.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Heaven knows we've been struggling, right?
We are back
Oh,
on,
yes.
folks. We are back on officially. Thank you so much. Again, I ask everyone to please launch their video. I appreciate that. I'd like to remind once more of our housekeeping that you will be given up to 2 minutes to be able to answer the questions. And then please, keep in mind of the notes and warrant alerts that we are sharing with you during your 15-second warning, and the time is up. And that way we will be able to go through all the questions and be able to answer all of them as well. Okay. So the next panelist that will be asking a question, I will defer to Mr. Marcel Camacho. Let's go ahead. As mentioned earlier, we may not be able to have everybody answer the same question. So I will be calling the candidate that will be answering the question that Mr. Marcel Camacho will be asking. And that question will go to Ms. Tello Tidegui. Marcel, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm only going to ask the question once, so please listen intently. Will you support the creation, introduction, and passage of a bill to change the operation of the Guam legislature from full-time to part-time?
Thank you, Marcel. Senator Marcel, it's good to see you. And you look good in the morning, don't underestimate
I just look good, Tello. It's not just in the morning. Human growth hormones now.
Well, absolutely. In fact, Marcel, I introduced legislation last year, I think 2019. I think it was in December, early part of December. I introduced a bill 256, to provide classified positions at the legislature, which I believe will bring continuity and stability. You know what it's like in the legislature, having those individuals being political hires. So this is the first step. I support a part-time legislature, but there are things that need to be in place before we do this. And the first step is to classify some of these positions over at the legislature, everything from the clerk to the ASO, individuals working on historical data, things like that. So I do support it. And I think we have to do this step process that would ensure that we do not undercut ourselves or undercut the people of Guam with providing that public service to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Tidegui. I'll also ask Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero to answer the question.
Well, thank you very much. I have been an avid advocate for a part-time legislature. Since the 32nd legislature, I've attempted to get legislation introduced to go back to a part-time legislature. Last year, I started the voter initiative process. I did 10 village meetings introducing a legislative reform package. So we did step one, which was introduce the meetings. We're preparing the documentation to submit it to the Guam Election Commission for approval as to wording before we started the signature collections when COVID hit. So I'm well on record as having been in favor of a part-time legislature. And if I'm successful at getting into the 36th, there's a package of legislative reform that I want to introduce in addition to part-time legislature, which would be returning to 21 senators and eliminating the primary election. By going to part-time, we get the best of the best running for the legislature, because for the past 6 years, I've been trying to encourage people to run, but they couldn't walk away from their businesses or their careers on a full-time basis. The second thing is, by going back to 21 with a part-time legislature, we'll have enough people to do the job. Right now, we're concentrating too much power in too few people when you have senators sitting there head of 5 committees, you know. So return to part-time, go back to 21, and also eliminating the primary will ensure a more open democracy and better government for Guam.
Thank you very much. I'll also have Senator Torres answer the question, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I am not in favor of a part-time legislature. I never have been, and let me explain why. When you consider that the Guam legislature is a unicameral body, we serve the function of both the House of Representatives and the Senate. So there's a lot of work to be done. Generally, the House of Representatives is very fast. It turns over every 2 years. The Senate is a more focused type of deliberative body. That's one reason why I don't think a part-time will work. The second reason, I think fundamentally, we have to remember that the legislature is one of 3 co-equal branches of government, with the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive branch. And in addition to that, you've got the Organic Act, which gives the governor broad powers. I mean, imagine right now we're screaming about what the governor is able to do by executive order. If you now go to a part-time legislature, you've severely caused a greater imbalance of powers. If you have the governor with her broad powers, the legislature as a part-time, and the judiciary, whose only capacity really is to interpret the laws and make rulings on the laws. So that's one thing. But I think what most of us really have to step back and consider is that when you do a job that's tied into a salary, who is your loyalty to? Are you beholden to the big bucks, the business that pays you the salary? Or are you beholden to public service as a public servant if you're a part-time legislator? And there's nothing right now that prevents senators, and there are many senators who have other than this senatorial job. So it's not that they can't serve in other capacities, and many of them do, and have also, you know, other side investments in business interests. But I think that the great imbalance of power will do all of us a disservice if we go to a part-time legislature. And that is fundamentally why I think that model does not work for Guam, the way our Organic Act is structured, and with our small population especially, and concentration of power and the special interest potential.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. I'd like to ask Mr. Dominique Hernandez to answer that question too, please.
Thank you. Yes, I do support the idea of moving from a full-time to a part-time legislative. You know, there are a lot of reasons we should move to a part-time. One of the reasons being that given our circumstances economically, we do have to make cuts somewhere. And as somebody that is a candidate and running to hoping become a senator, you know, I don't mind switching to part-time to be able to help out, especially for economical reasons, to help recover everything. It is going to take time. There are things we have to address and make sure that everything is set up prior to moving to a part-time legislator. But I definitely approve the idea and would be more than happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next panelist that will be asking a question is Mr. Monty McDowell. Mr. Monty McDowell, are you ready for us?
Oh.
Question number 2. And that will be addressed to the first candidate that will be answering that is Senator James Moylan.
Is this the BPT question?
Yes, sir. Number 2.
Okay, and I'm addressing it to Senator Moylan.
Moylan is the first individual that will be answering.
Okay, as you know, there was one time in the current legislature that there was a hearing for your bill to roll back the BPT GRT from 5 to 4%, and I think every major business in Guam was down there. There was people hanging in the rafters, and they were testifying of the gut-wrenching explanations of why it needed to be rolled back. And the great disappointment is, and it comes back to the us and them, Gov Guam and the private sector. We continually don't get heard by the government. The legislature seemed to listen and then continue doing nothing. So would you support the repeal of the 1% increase in business privilege tax and restoring it back to 4%?
Thank you, Monty, for that question. Absolutely. You mentioned before, we did have a public hearing for that, and we had great support for that. The public voice was heard at the public hearing. The media reported on it just as well. Many social groups, social media also discussed it too. There's a great need back then, as now, to roll back the BBT. Unfortunately, you see why we don't get the support by the majority of the senators to move this any further, nor do we have the support at all from the governor, who has said this BBT will remain at 5% forever if she so had the authority to do so. I will introduce, if I'm brought back into the 36th Guam legislature, again, the opportunity to bring back the BBT from 5 to 4%. We need to do this, especially now. Businesses, if they're going to get back into business, what do they have to do? They got to stock their shelves, hire their employees, hope for the best, that they have a customer base that is still there. And then what? Pay high taxes like we did before, only to find out later that we had a surplus of over $30-some million in FY19 when we could have reduced the taxes then, but no, we didn't. And so what's going to need to happen is that, hopefully we can change this body of this in the 36th Guam legislature with thinking minds that can support small businesses, and that's what we're missing. I've been trying to look for people to run for this legislature that has that same mindset, but it's difficult. But with your help, with the Guam Real Estate Board here and the members, maybe we can put the right people in the legislature that will support the small business and make this a business-friendly environment on Guam. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. The next individual to answer that would be Mr. Frank Laws.
Well, thank you, ma'am. And one word answer to this question, absolutely. But I want to further with this is that if we can manage to reduce it by even more, that would be even better. I find it very interesting that, the governor, there's this thing called government revenues and the government raising money. No, the government doesn't raise money. It's the economy that raises the money that the government tends to spend. And I also find very interesting is that a lot of times you've got from the government says, well, businesses, it's too expensive. You raise your prices, or you're not going to lower your prices. Well, I find it very interesting that when government says, businesses, you got to lower your prices, the government never lowers theirs. Yet you're still required to provide a level of service. We don't have that same thing with the government. So while we lower and we can, do we have that ability to be able to lower that, that tax as well as other fees and other impositions of money against the community? Yes, there is. So absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frank Laws. The next individual to answer the question, please, is Senator Torres.
Thank you. At the time that we increased the BPT to 1%, we were dealing with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the correlating reduction in revenues. And so that was why that was put in as an interim measure. And at the time that we voted for it during the Budget Act, many of us believed that it was contingent on a sunset, that would occur. I definitely would support a rollback, but I think we have to be clear about what that corresponding reduction in government spending is going to entail. If 68% of government expenses is already allocated to education, public health, and public safety, there isn't all that much fat to cut. So it would have to require other government services or maybe a reduction in those. So I would most definitely be open to that very hard question of how do we shrink the government, But I think that it has to be a two-part effort. You can't just advocate for it without the corresponding plan to shrink the budget. But I think that it's right now Guam is not sustainable on this current trajectory, and that we definitely have to reduce our government and our spending and give some relief to the businesses who are paying those taxes.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. I'd also like to ask Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero to answer the same question.
Starting back in 2016, when the subject of taxes were coming up, I testified in the legislature numerous times against the budgets, pointing out the obvious fact that the Trump tax cuts were very likely, considering that he'd been elected, and then one of his campaign promises was to roll back taxes. So we had a 1-year window to address government of Guam's operating costs, and the legislature at the time failed to take that timely step. I'm in favor of rolling back the business privilege tax because it's the only way we can bring a sense of discipline to government of Guam. Over the past 10 years, the economy of Guam has remained stagnant, and the last 3 years, the economy of Guam has actually shrunk by $200 million prior to the COVID. In 2020, we were on our way to a deficit year until COVID hit, and a 1.6 billion federal dollars got dropped into our economy. Had it not been for that 1.6 billion, we were on track to have another major deficit. So we need to bring a sense of discipline to how our government spends money, and we can't keep running back-to-back record-breaking budgets. In the past 10 years, the budget of government of Guam has doubled, but the economy hasn't doubled. So unless we start reducing the incentives to keep expanding the cost of operations for the government, nothing is going to change there. We're going to see government of Guam growth continue at double-digit rates. At the same time, our unemployment is catastrophic in nature. We've lost thousands of businesses that are never going to pay their 2020 taxes, let alone be able to pay their 2021 taxes. So we need to get a sense of discipline back, and it starts with rolling back the business privilege tax, putting more money in the hands of consumers in an attempt to take our businesses off life support.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much, Mr. Leon Guerrero. Next question will go to our panelist again, Mr. Monty McDowell. That will be question number 3 on our list. Monty, you're muted right now. Let me go ahead and
Dispenses. Are you in favor of increasing taxes and fees to deal with government of Guam revenue shortfalls caused by COVID-19 imposed restrictions on private sector business operations?
I'd like to address that question to Senator Taitigui.
Thank you, Monty, for that question. Absolutely not. You know, government of Guam should not take more from taxpayers, particularly when thousands of people are out of work. The government of Guam needs to adjust itself, streamline operations, consolidate agencies and program, and outsource certain services by reducing fees and including development, construction costs, and encourage new economy moving forward. So absolutely not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next individual to answer, please, is Mr. Dominic Hernandez.
Thank you. No, I am not in favor of increasing any taxes or fees. Given the circumstances of the economy, you know, many businesses have had to consolidate within their own departments. They've had to downsize and do what they had to do in order to survive. And I believe the government can do the same thing. We, as Senator Tello has said, you know, we can consolidate government agencies. We can begin looking at other aspects of where we can cut the fat off to be able to reduce the amount of government expenditure so that we don't have any shortfalls. So no, I don't agree with it. I won't support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next individual to answer, if I could ask Senator Moylan, please.
Thank you. Definitely not at all. Just like the BBT, we should be looking at reducing fees to allow our small businesses to continue to grow. But we can already look at reducing our expenses within the government. I've been an advocate for removing deputy director positions. Back when we first had our first budget, that at that time that was around $1.5 million for deputy director positions. And why? You know, there's also things in the budget called Pacific Islands Development Bank. That's another $1 million investment for something on the island that we should be focusing right now, especially today, on helping our citizens here. There's a Guam Police Department security for the executive office, close to $1 million of expenses when that money is coming directly out of Guam Police Department's budget, when they should be using that budget to help with the security and the safety of our island residents. Leave that money where it's supposed to be. So there's so many things we can look at reducing our expenses and not looking at increasing fees. I would not support increasing fees. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. I'd like to ask Mr. Frank Loss to answer the same question, please.
Okay, I'll answer that question in 2 words. Absolutely not. You know, I think that, you know, within the resources we already have that exist, you know, there is the money that's there to be able to continue on with the response. You know, a person brought up, you know, we've had government employees who have had to stay home because of lockdown, and yet they were told to telework or, you know, not work at all and still continue to get paid. Then I find it interesting that we hired individuals to do contact tracing. Well, if I remember correctly, it's called the government of Guam. Why couldn't we take the individuals that we have at home who aren't doing anything, bring them over so that we can use them as contact tracers, or help them to fill some of the gaps that are necessary, that aren't, you know, they're not exposed to the virus, but can help in being able to combat that. So you know, there are things that could be done within what we have already that can help to achieve what we want to accomplish.
Thank you very much. Now, there's a follow-up question to that, and I'm going to defer to our President-elect, Sean Bloss, to do a follow-up question on that, on Monty's earlier question. Go ahead, please.
All right. So there's much discussion on how the pandemic is currently being handled. What is your position on how the administration is handling it? And what would you do differently to further address the needs of the residents, especially those who may disagree?
May I ask Senator Torres to answer this one, please?
Of course, I would be the first one to answer that one. It's really hard to gauge what is the right course, given that there's no precedent, right? We've not had a pandemic to deal with. It is a worldwide situation, so it's not an only on Guam situation. So to that, I give the governor some credit. You can't say that what she's doing is not being done in other jurisdictions, other states, and other countries. What I do believe, though, is that what we have to pay greater focus on, aside, not so much locking down and holding people back, but we really have to focus on risk mitigation, because why COVID is spreading, the super spreader situations really go back to what we're doing as individuals. You know, how we're containing it, how we're practicing social distancing, safe hygiene practices, all those sorts of things. What we have to be, what I'm especially sensitive to is that while we can just let people be and let business be, we cannot do so at the peril of the health of our health management. We can't do it at the peril of our hospitals, who will not be able to provide enough ventilators should we become critical ill, or, you know, we adversely impact them. So I think that what we should have done differently was put more responsibility on individual people as opposed to absolute lockdown. That's just my personal opinion. But I can't fault the governor for making decisions, because it's never been tried or true. There's no precedent to say what is the right way. But I think it really is incumbent on us to do the right thing and not be in a super spreader situation, which I think has been the, you know, the domino effect with this whole COVID issue.
Thank you, Senator Torres. I appreciate that. I'd like to ask Senator Moylan to answer the same, please.
We know what we know now. You know, when we started, we're learning, and I think we've learned a lot from this, from our experience, and how to deal with it, from Adelup to legislature to private enterprise, and especially to the CDC. And I believe many of the businesses are following along with the CDC guidelines and even improving upon it. And if there are businesses out there that don't, then those are the ones that should be controlled and regulated even further. But we need to move forward from where we are now. And with that experience, I think the government can open up a lot more, like what we discussed from the beginning with the realtors and $2 billion worth of business and so forth. It's our physical health, but it's also our economic health. And we have a great deal of folks that are suffering. Well, they're surviving from the COVID, but they're also suffering economically, and we need to move forward to help these families, because this stress is unhealthy. So I would like to see things open up much sooner than later. And I'm glad we learned from our experience of the past and how we can improve on that, so we can get our economy and our island back into good health and into good spirits, and bring it back to things more normal, so we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. I'd like to ask Mr. Leon Guerrero to answer the same, please.
Well, my perspective is a little different, because I have been fighting for a stronger public health system for about 6 years. Here on Guam, the leading cause of death is chronic illness, chronic diseases and illness. And as we look at the reports coming out of Adelup, we have 5 deaths total that are COVID specific. Everything else is underlying health conditions aggravated by COVID. So we have a bigger problem than COVID here. We have a public health care system that is designed for emergency care rather than preventive care. Whereas if we had one that was designed primarily for preventive care, I think the impacts would be a lot less. The second concern I have is that the government of Guam has received nearly $2 billion of federal funds, allegedly for improving and protecting the people of Guam. But when we see large chunks of that being carved out for politically well-connected insiders through sweetheart contracts,
what are you guys doing?
Interest, that is money that is not going to benefit the people of Guam. So if we go through a situation like this, I would argue that we need stronger public oversight on how these emergency funds are being expended for the benefit of the taxpayers and the people of Guam that they are supposed to be benefiting, because that is how we move forward from here. But taking all the money that's coming in and buying, you know, designer Gucci bag laptops and 4K TVs, things like that don't make the people of Guam safer or open our businesses faster. And that's my biggest concern coming out of this pandemic. Are we going to take the lessons we've learned in how this pandemic was handled and improve them, so that if in the event we have another one, and I believe we probably will, that we do things better and smarter and safer?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Leon Guerrero. I'd like to call our next panelist, our Vice Chair, Ray Haddock, to ask the next question, and we will ask Senator Taitaghi to answer this one, please. Mr. Ray Haddock, are you able to ask this next question for us, please? Number 4 on our list.
Yeah, sorry, I was just in the court hearing. It just so happened to leave or just end right now. But The question that was presented was, will you support a significant reduction in the government of Guam expenditures, including payroll during the COVID-19 lockdown and PCOR 2 periods in order to keep the government of Guam solvent?
Yeah. Thank you, Ray. Good to see you. I see that you're multitasking. Good job. Absolutely, like I said, whether it's because of its COVID, SARS, or any economic recession, government Guam can't spend money it doesn't have. Everything needs to be put on the table, even including payroll, regardless of political correctiveness. Guam simply can't continue to operate the way it has in previous years. In the FY 2021 budget, we cut more than $50 million when compared to FY 2020. But we need to do more so that we don't default on our debts and that we ensure continuity and critical services going forward. It requires decision makers to make the hard decisions and choices, because if we don't, then our physical reality in the months ahead is going to decide for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to ask the same question to Mr. Frank Laws, please.
Thank you. Well, one of the concerns that I have in the question is basically defining the word significant. And that can have a very broad spectrum. That said, though, is that should there have been a reduction of sort of corresponding reduction? Yes, there should have been. I served in served in one administration, and then in another administration where government revenues, weren't that hot, and there had needed to be some fiscal measures taken, and it meant basically a temporary reduction in pay, not just at the cabinet level, but at all levels. Did we survive? Yes, we did. Thankfully, this was a very protracted, time period, but it was a necessary action so that we can keep the government solvent. This is not a time for us to be able to, force businesses to stay home, yet pay the taxes so that we can keep the government going. No, there's got to be some corresponding action to a decision that you're making. You want to keep the government solvent for what? To serve a business or to community that has no economy? It doesn't make any sense. So we've got to, like in our households, okay? When money is tight, okay, we don't spend as much. So we need to do that as a government.
Thank you, Mr. Blas. I'd like to ask Senator Moylan to answer the same question, please.
Let's see. There we go. Okay. Thank you. So yes, expenditures need to be cut in the government of Guam. That's definitely, and we can look at removing some of these contracts that aren't necessary. And also there's redundancy in agencies. For example, GLUC, Chamorro Land Trust Commission, and Senatorial Land Trust Commission, they can all possibly put under Department of Land Management as well. We can look at eliminating positions I mentioned earlier before, deputy director positions. Really, is that necessary during this time? I don't believe so. So there's several things that we can do to streamline our government, so we don't necessarily have to cut the government's employees' salaries necessarily, so they can continue on to perform their functions and necessities. So I think we should look at consolidating our agencies, streamlining them, and getting rid of some of these unnecessary contracts that we currently have. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. I'd like to call our next panelist to ask a question. I'll defer to our chairman, John Duenas, for our question number 5 on our list.
The question is, are you in favor of increasing the local minimum wage, and why? And Peggy, you can...
Yeah, I'd like to ask Senator Torres to answer the question, please.
Thank you. What we have to consider is what the climate is at any given time that you consider raising the cost of running a business. And certainly at this time, that is not, increasing the minimum wage would not be a prudent time. I think also when we had the last votes, I've always voted in favor of incremental raises, because there has to be a bottom line living wage, or a minimum wage, where people that work full time should be able to get by, at least get by in our economy. But we also understand what happened when we raised the minimum wage. Not only is it a cost to the businesses, but there's also the compression factor, where it requires you to level it and raise all other wages above the minimum wage, just to make up for the disparity in duties versus salaries. So at this point, I would not, until Guam is at a point where we're recovering sufficiently and our businesses are sound, would I consider a wage increase. And until then, I would not. I think it would just break the camel's back, so to speak.
Thank you, Senator Torres. I'd like to ask the same question to Mr. Dominique Hernandez.
Thank you. No, I'm not in favor of increasing local minimum wage. There are several reasons to this. One being that every time we've raised minimum wage, everything else rises up with it. In a sense, it kind of defeats the purpose of why we raise the minimum wage. That being one of the reasons. The other reason is you have people that have worked years and years and years into a business, who worked their way up from $7.25 an hour to $10 an hour. And, they got to the $10 an hour. Now minimum wage is up to $8.75, yet they're still stuck at 10, despite the fact having all those experience and all those years of working with that company. And I can understand from their level that it's not fair that every year the minimum wage seems to keep increasing and closing that gap between them, while their wages are barely going up at all. So if we can find a way to be able to make those wages go up as well, I would be in support of it. On the same note, though, I do believe that with minimum wage, the idea isn't for people to make a living off of it. It's just to get started, get on their feet, and make a career out of it by going through the process of getting promotions and so forth. And so I believe more in educating people to develop better skills and trades so that they can proceed further in their promotions, or to be able to find jobs that are going to pay better wages than minimum wage versus just increasing the minimum wage. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the same question to Senator Taitigui, please.
I'm sorry, did you say Taitigui?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I answered your survey with regards to the minimum wage increase, especially since it happened just recently, that increase. I support a living wage, and I think that the cost of living on Guam is very expensive, but I only support a minimum wage together with a BPT rate reduction. Now, if they're going to increase the minimum wage, then they should also decrease the reduction in the BPT. And I think right now, wages won't do much, right now for working Comanians if the costs and goods and continue to go up. So at this time, it would definitely not be a good idea. I think we need to make the first step in providing jobs, and that means to assist businesses to get back on their feet. Everything from lowering fees or costs associated with running a business. I was a small business owner. I own 2 businesses. And it's very difficult. I find myself that all the money that I'm making going straight to the government of Guam. And the most important thing was to provide my employees their salary first. But I think right now we need to first work on helping businesses get back on their feet, and providing a minimum wage right this is not the way to go. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to call our next panelist to ask a question. Our member Mr. Ron de Guzman, and let's have Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero be the first to answer this question.
Good morning, senators and candidates. Thank you for being with us today. As you know, many small businesses have been suffering these past several months. Some small local businesses that have been in the community for a long time have actually closed down permanently. Would you be in favor of reducing taxes and fees to assist small businesses and maintaining their viability?
Definitely. I would definitely be interested in supporting an effort to reduce taxes and fees for all businesses on Guam, not just the small businesses, because the economy needs to grow. Now, there are a lot of people talking about, let's bring new industries to Guam. Bringing a new industry to Guam is going to take 10 years to get it started, whereas working on making conditions supportive of the existing industries and the existing businesses is going to be a faster way of jumpstarting this economy than spending millions of dollars trying to lure another business to Guam that we won't see any tax benefit from for 10 or 20 years, depending on their qualifying certificates. Reducing fees and taxes locally. And one of the things I've been trying to get the legislature to do for 6 years now is delink from the US IRS tax code. Had we delinked back in 2010, when I first started pursuing this idea with the 32nd, I think, we wouldn't have been whammied as hard as we got with the Trump tax cuts. And our economy would have been in a better position to weather the storm we're going through right now. But we didn't do that then. And we probably won't do it for a while now because of the pandemic situation. But what we can do is look at the taxes locally that we can reduce and the fees we can reduce. With the idea of reducing taxes and fees to local businesses will increase the spend in the local economy. So if we reduce taxes and fees over here, we should get it back over there in the form of corporate taxes and payroll taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Leon Guerrero. I'd like to ask the same question to Senator Torres, please.
Yes, we definitely need to reduce the burden on businesses that are operating and also people that are trying to come into businesses. And the small businesses are clearly the critical area that we have to protect and ensure that whatever tax packages are available to relieve them, or any relief packages, that we consistently prepare that. But what we also have to consider is what would be for a business-friendly environment. And a lot of times it's the regulatory, the over-regulating businesses tends to make it harder for them to thrive. So we would have to consider laxing some of the regulatory burdens and other barriers that are faced by those that want to come into to doing business. But we definitely, as in the past, all the relief efforts that the legislature, bills that have been introduced while I've been in, I've supported, because I think that if you just have a climate that is friendly and conducive to not only coming into business but staying in business, that we always have to advocate for those business-friendly types of policies, and that's where I will continue to go in the future.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to ask the same question to Mr. Frank Laws.
Yes, I am definitely in favor of reducing the fees and the taxes that we impose on businesses that want to start up. As a matter of fact, I, along with fellow candidate Vince Borja, have recently released our plan. It's called RX5, Guam's prescription to recovering our economy. And part of that is a process of being able to revive the businesses, the small businesses that have suffered, but then also give individuals an opportunity to be able to start up a business, minus or absent a lot of the fees. It's one thing. Small businesses today have to deal with not just the fees, but the regulations. And sometimes these regulations cost money, cost more than the fees. And so there has got to be some balance here. And when you've got a business who wants to start up and finds out that, before they start up, they got to pay all of this money to the government, it goes back to my whole theory. Government has got to be able to service the community and help the community to grow, not stymie it. And if the process, if the fees and the regulations were just to continue to feed that 800-pound gorilla, well, maybe that gorilla's got to go on a diet. And part of that is being able to make sure that the community can prosper. So yes, I am definitely in support of being able to reduce those fees.
Thank you very much. Our next panelist to address the question is Mr. Marcel Camacho. Is Mr. Marcel Camacho able to read that question? But prior to that, I'd like to revert back to our chairman, John Duenas, in reference to question number 5 regarding the minimum wage.
Yes, I wanted to make a little comment and then ask a question of some of the senators. I think Senator Torres would be the first one to ask. In your previous responses to the minimum wage and then to the question of reducing taxes and fees, I thought I detected a little bit of a conflict. You said that perhaps we should have a minimum wage be a living wage. And on the other hand, we should get out of the way of businesses, small businesses, to make sure that they continue to be viable. In many companies in the private sector, we see the imposition of a minimum wage as an adverse action on our operation, particularly if you have a hierarchy. For example, if you're a survey aide, you're given a minimum wage, but then above you, you have instrument men, party chiefs, and then on up the line. If you artificially increase their wages, not wages that the market can offer these professions, you end up changing the salaries completely up the ladder, and then we have to make adjustments to fees. I think you see the same in restaurant operations and so on and so forth. Why do you feel like the government should impose a minimum wage such that it becomes a living wage? I just wanted to hear your comments.
No, I think what I meant to say is ideally we would love to be in a situation where people can survive on a base wage, which is what the minimum wage was intended to do. The living wage is more commensurate with the cost of living. But to your point, though, I also commented that one of the downfalls that we saw from the last minimum wage increase was the compression factor, which you were talking about. How if you increase the minimum wage at one base level, all other jobs above it and steps above it end up getting, you would have to adjust them correspondingly. A lot of times too, what we did note was that the people above the minimum wage earner, the base wage earner, were doing double duty to compensate for the higher salaries. I am not in favor of a minimum wage increase because I understand what it does to a business, how it not only affects, like the compression factor, how it affects every other salary up the ladder, but it also makes the cost of doing business impossible or unaffordable, and fees go up. So I just meant ideally we would love to be in a situation where we can survive on a base wage, but I do not support breaking the backs of small businesses or any business to accommodate a minimum wage when the economy does not support that. So no. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I wanted to direct the same question, but with a comment to Ken Leon Guerrero. And Ken, we already have a federal minimum wage. And for many years, that was what the base was. But then we've seen cities, Seattle, maybe Los Angeles, I'm not sure, have increased the minimum wage to 15, and it forced a lot of businesses to close down or to shrink operations. Why do you think we need to have a local minimum wage when we already have a federal minimum wage?
Well, you asked a 20-minute question, and I'll try to, the question that requires a 20-minute answer. I'm going to try to do it in 2 minutes. Here we live in an island here where the cost of living is going up 20 to 25% a year. Right now, it takes $28 an hour just to afford the basics on Guam. That's a roof over your head, food, utilities, and transportation. It's $28 an hour. 63% of the jobs on this island, according to Guam Department of Labor, are low-wage service sector jobs, and none of them pay $28 an hour. So what we see is a large population here of multi-generational households. I'm one of them. My son and daughter live with me because they can't afford on their salaries to rent a quality residence. We have a lot of people putting off getting married and having children because they can't afford it. And we also see about 1,500 of our young people every year leave the island because they can't find the jobs that will keep them here, because we do not have a path to middle class here on Guam. You're either in a low-wage service sector job. The only middle class jobs we have basically are in government of Guam. So unless, that's why everybody will quit any job anywhere on the island to go work for government of Guam. It's the golden ticket. So the problem we have here, it goes back to land as the basis for all wealth, and the federal government is artificially driving up rents, which are pricing our people out of the market. The apartment I stayed in 2007, when I first came back to Guam, was $500 a month. That same apartment today is now $1,300 a month. The only difference between the apartment then and the apartment now, because I know who owns it and I keep track of it, it's one of my leading indicators, is coats of paint and a new door because the old one rotted out. But does that justify going from $500 a month to $1,300 a month? What's doing that? We have HUD coming in, taking houses out of the market. We have the military taking houses out of the market, even though they have maybe 150 or 200 vacant units at Opera and on the bases, because people want to live in the community. So we have an asymmetrical market. We have a large low-income population trying to survive, and as a result, we're losing our best and brightest. I talk to people every day who are leaving the island forever because they can't afford to live here. So at some point in time, we're going to have to create some sensible policies to address the #1 problem that's driving the cost of living. And all you have to do is look at the federal cost of living adjustments. It's 15 to 18% a year. And every time the federal cost of living goes up, what do you think happens to the housing? It goes up right along with it. So whether you repaint it or change a doorknob, you've priced a local family out. And I don't blame the realtors or the property owners. A friend of mine had a duplex in Jigo. By borrowing $18,000 and upgrading it to military standards, he was able to quadruple the rent. But two local families got priced out.
Thank you, Ken. I know Monty probably wants to make a comment because we both have share kind of the same point of view. So maybe Monty, you can either ask a question or so we can move on to the other.
I retired from the Navy in 1990 in a Pearl Harbor shipyard, and I came back home, started advanced management, and I could not get it. A minimum wage at that time was $4.25. I could not get a high school dropout for less than $6. The market drove it. And I've always felt that the market will always drive whatever the wages are. And when the legislature gets into setting minimum wage, I feel you're social engineering and you're buying votes. That's plain and simple my feeling. The federal government does it, and then we got to outdo the federal government by a little bit, so we look like you really care for the people. And the other, as far as I think John and I are on the same team, that these are entrance jobs that we give these people an opportunity to come in, and then we give them the opportunity to be skilled and be promoted. Every time the legislature has done a minimum wage, I have lost a half a dozen employees because my customers can't afford the price point I have to adjust my sales to in order to pay for these employees. So there's ramifications to the actions. And then we have, I know Kenya was saying you need $28 an hour. You know, in our higher skilled job, you know, electricians, air conditioning technicians that I have, I'm one of the founding fathers, and I'm currently the vice chairman of the Trades Academy. And I tell you, the hardest thing I have is trying to get my own employees or anybody to go get skilled. So it takes, the rule of thumb is it takes 3 employees in a certain trade skill in Guam to do what 1 journeyman does in the state of Hawaii. And they get paid more than we do here because they're certified, the journeyman. And the people who graduate and become journeymen out of our school also get paid commensurate with, and they will get the living wage to be part of the 27%, I guess, if Ken's figures are right, that to get enough income to live sufficiently on this island of ours. But there's a lot of things that the employee themselves have to take a personal responsibility that the legislature can't social engineer. Just my comment as a businessman in the private sector for 30 years. This is my 30th year. Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
agree with
Thank you,
everything that
Monty.
Monty just said.
Thank you very
Because
much.
what we're looking at is why I said we needed more like a 20-minute answer to that question.
Well, yes, and we're looking forward to maybe working with you folks in the legislature to address that, or at least an aspect of it. Okay, Peggy, you can.
Thank you.
Continue.
Now I think it's time for us to take that second and final break. It's 11:02 right now. It's almost 11:03, just a few more. So let's reconvene at 11:10, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. We will proceed to our next question, and we have our panelist, Mr. Marcel Camacho had left us for a little bit, so I will go ahead and defer it to our Mr. Monty McDowell is not back, so let me go ahead and defer this to our Vice Chair,
Right.
Wei Haddock, please. Number 7 question, Wei, from our list. And I would like to ask Senator Moylan to be the first to answer this. Thank you.
Sorry, as my button wasn't working very well. But the question that's posed to the group is, what functions of the government of Guam do you believe should be privatized?
Thank you, Ray, for the questions. But there's a few I think we could look at, and we privatized other agency before. That was back a while ago for GTA. But one thing I would think we should look at now, especially with the pandemic, is the management of our hospital, public-private partnership of our hospital. Of course, we know we do need a new hospital, but we also need to understand how to properly manage the hospital. So I would look at that as one of the agencies. I would also consider the Guam Regional Transportation Authority. Sure, we have federal funds, and we had those buses now provided through those federal funds, but I also think the function of that, our bus system, should be a privatized entity. I would support that as well. And I also introduced a bill previously, 5835, for the public-private partnership of our public beaches as well, our parks and so forth. We've seen recent articles about the cemeteries too, but that's all under Department of Parks and Recs. And basically this agency is not able to upkeep and perform their duties. So we should look at doing that. And I had a public hearing on that bill as well. And it went really well. It's just that these bills are all stuck in committee now to include everyone that I mentioned. So hopefully in the 36th Guam legislature, I can move these continuously forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. I'd like to ask the same question to Senator Taitigui, please.
Okay. Thank you so much for that question. And absolutely, I think one of the places that's received a lot of publicity is the swimming pools. If the private sector can run their swimming pools, I'm pretty sure we can get them to run the government of Guam swimming pools, and probably with less finances. So the management of certain public parks, of course, supports sports facilities, maintenance services. We can improve mass transit, public parking if considered, and perhaps power generation. My support for outsourcing of certain services will include a renew of pertinent information regarding personal attrition and cost comparisons as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taitigui. I'd like to ask the same to Mr. Dominic Hernandez.
Thank you. In my opinion, there's many different functions that I believe should be privatized. I do agree with Parks and Recs and taking care of the parks. With tourism currently down, tourism eventually is going to come back. And this would be a great opportunity to try to privatize that sector to be able to get them to clean up the parks and take care of it, because as the news has shown lately, they were just talking about it, that it's roughly, I believe, 4 employees per parks areas to be able to clean them. Obviously, they need help managing it to be able to maintain it and take care of it. So this is something we can look into to bring it out to the private sector to be able to take over and be able to reduce costs on the government side as far as being able to take care of it and be able to manage it. And other areas as well, like Senator Moylan has said, management of the hospitals, definitely something I believe the private sector should be looking into, being that throughout all the years we've had issues with management coming through the hospitals as far as getting proper or managing the proper funds that's being sent to it and so forth. So there are many different aspects we can look into, but I definitely do agree that we should begin looking into it and possibly begin even privatizing some of these functions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hernandez. So I'll I'll go to our next panelist. That will be Mr. Juan de Guzman, and a follow-up question, as I understand, will also be posed by our immediate past president, Bobby Sashdesh. Ron, please go ahead, and I would like to ask Mr. Frank Loss to answer this question first.
Okay, this is an easy 2-minute question. Do you support the military buildup?
Okay, I can take 2 minutes to say yes. I do support the military buildup. As a matter of fact, I had the pleasure and the honor, privilege of sitting with Governor Felix Camacho when General Daniel Leaf first introduced formally the process that was going to begin. Now, and granted, as with any plan, things change. And as the changes occur, you know, one of the things that we want to do is keep on top of the change, as well as to be able to discuss it. Is there the ability and the opportunity to be able to improve that process, that communications collaborative process? You sure there is, but that doesn't mean that we should just drop everything. You know, this is not just an opportunity for us to grow business here, but you know, there's that other side that we've got to be very wary of, that there are people that don't necessarily agree with our way of life and our democracy that maybe want to challenge that. And for many of those reasons, you know, along with that privilege and opportunity of being with the governor when it was first introduced, was, again, I happened to be the Homeland Security Advisor, and I remember having that discussion with Governor Camacho at that time as the Homeland Security Advisor. What do you want me to push in DC? Military buildup, Chinese or Chinese visa waiver? Yeah, they can't mix. They won't match. So which one do we want to go for? I got the mandate. I was able to read up on it, study it, see the benefits, and so yes, I do agree.
Thank you, Mr. Blas. I'd like to ask the same question to Senator Torres, please.
I am in support of the military buildup, and I always have been, because I believe that it makes for a stronger, safer island fundamentally. But I do believe, though, that we must be a bigger player at the table with regard to military buildup on island and the impact on cultural sites that are sensitive. You know, culture is one of those things that really can only be perpetuated by the person who owns the culture, which is us, the Chamorro people. But I think that the communication is key in anything to having a coexistence between the military objectives and the quality of life that we want to enjoy as residents of our island. But I think the military buildup in these times of worldwide threat and terrorist threat, especially with our Asian powers, we have to be a little more receptive to what the military has to offer us in terms of security and safety, in especially in this part of the Western Pacific. But dialogue. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was.
You have a few more seconds.
Communication is key, and being an equal voice at the table is critical for the military buildup to continue, though.
Thank you, Senator. I apologize about that interruption. And I'd like to ask Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero to answer the same, please.
I'm definitely in support of the military buildup. I think the military buildup, we've done it before, so we know how to do it. I think it's going to be the fastest way to add new jobs to our economy and lure more businesses to the island, just because of the increased business opportunities with the military. Back in 2010, when the buildup was first announced, they were proposing 30,000 Marines, but they were going to transfer most of the civilian jobs from Okinawa. And we were only going to see about 300 to 600 local jobs created with the 30,000 Marines moving over. Now those plans have changed, and I agree with Senator Torres. We need to engage the military more aggressively than we're currently doing now. The current communication is more passive. I think that if we had a stronger presence at the table, we could see more of the business opportunities for local businesses to develop, and we would also see opportunities to lure non-existing businesses to Guam in support of the military. And I think that would go a long way towards helping kickstart our economy until we bring tourism back online.
Thank you, Mr. Leon Guerrero. I'm going to go ahead and defer to our immediate past president, Bobby Sajdej, to address his follow-up question on this.
Good morning and almost good afternoon, senators and to-be senators. With all your continued support and your support for the military buildup, I was wondering what kind of legislation would you be able to provide or to draft up to help expedite this support? For example, right now, to accommodate for this military buildup, GLUC, the $2 billion worth of pending projects that we have, can we make certain legislation much easier? Number two, perhaps some ease of restrictions on H-2B. I know that's a federal mandate rather than a local mandate, but there are certain areas that are under our control, like the workforce housing, where many of these H-2Bs are staying at right now, which requires certain zoning and certain rules. What type of legislation do you see yourself supporting or introducing that will help with the military buildup and your support for it?
Senator Moylan, may I ask you to answer this question first, please?
Sure. Thank you, Bobby. I think we also discussed this a little bit earlier by making the real estate business an essential essential function with $2 billion worth of pending business, and that desperately needs the government agencies to open up today, not tomorrow, not by the 36th Guam legislature, but by today with the executive order or the governor getting things done. I'll be introducing more, or have introduced legislation and will continue to do so, to make it our island a more business-friendly government to help these businesses move forward. With the military buildup here, we have great opportunity for small businesses to come and get established, and also for the real estate market to really open up and housing development to grow, which would all lead back to our economy. And I'm definitely in favor of the military buildup, and I took field trips there, and I see what they're doing. And of course, they have the repository for all the artifacts and creating jobs for those people working there to ensure that these artifacts are well taken care of too. So to directly answer your question, yes, I've introduced legislation in the 35th, and I will continue to do so in the 36th, to make this a business-friendly environment, a government that wants to welcome business and not overtax them, so that we can take full benefit of the opportunity of this new money coming in through the military buildup. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. I'd like to ask Mr. Dominic Hernandez to answer the same, please.
Thank you. One of the ways we could look into helping speed up the process, and we spoke about it earlier, was lowering taxes and fees for two main purposes. One, so that the big corporations could have the ability to hire more, especially when it comes to locals, to get these projects rolling and going, being that the H2 is mainly federal. And that's going to be a bit of a challenge, but we can look into at least trying to get local people hired so that we can get these projects rolling and get moving on it. As well, with the small business aspect of it, individual contractors to come in, make their bids for these contracts, and to get their businesses started so they can get rolling and stimulate our economy as well. So that's one aspect, is lowering taxes and fees. And another one would be to open up these businesses, especially with the real estate industries, to be considered essential, and to open up the agency so that they can get those projects rolling, they can get the proper documentation done, and so forth. You know, the longer we wait, the longer everything is going to be delayed, or the longer it's going to take just to get it processed. And like I said before, there are many different ways for us to be able to get the process done, especially with the use of technology. It doesn't have to all be in person. We could do phone conversations to discuss the matters and issues. Again, we can email back and forth what we need, especially when it comes to proper documentations and so forth. So we need to utilize all these tools that are available for us and get these things rolling as soon as possible within a safe manner, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Titlery, please.
Thank you. And hi, Bobby. How you doing? Still waiting for the PUC to get our petition going, but it's coming shortly, so not to worry. You know, I stated earlier, and even in the 30th Guam legislature, when the military buildup was starting to take part into our community, and it was important to ensure that, you know, the 4 pillars were adhered to and agreed to in the programmatic agreement, and to ensure that they're following it. And I have to give kudos to all these nonprofit organizations, environmentalists, those who are in historical preservation. They're doing their very best to ensure that, you know, when these historical sites are being uprooted, or any human remains, that they're adhering to these agreements that were placed into the programmatic agreement as well. And also the renewal of it to ensure that, you know, whatever they're doing right now that we see that are not in favor of the community's best interest, and most especially our heritage. If we lose that, we lose who we are, the people we are. So we're talking about the Guam Land Commission and what they're doing, how we can fast track it. Absolutely. You know, how can we ensure that this process is done quickly? We're trying to do it right now through legislations for nurses and doctors, you know, but this administration has taken the initiative and they went ahead and implemented some fast track measures. So during this pandemic, that's what we're going to need to do with the Guam Land Use Commission, is maybe introduce some fast track measures to move this along. But again, we have to reach out to the governor because she has that authority right now. And any kind of legislation from now until the end of this term, it's going to be difficult to put on the plate. So like what Bobby and I did, I had a bill for the rates on condos. Oh, I'm sorry. So we need to do that just to advocate in every aspect. But yes, I would introduce legislation to fast track it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to our panelist. We don't have our chairman right now. He'll probably join back in. So I'm going to go ahead and have Marcel Camacho, if you can ask the question under the supplemental questionnaire list, number 1, please.
I apologize, Peggy, my power went out twice.
Oh,
and
that's
I
okay.
just got back online and I'm looking at, did we cover under general government, item number 7?
Yes, yes, we did.
Functions of the government of Guam should be privatized?
We're on our supplemental questionnaire.
I want to make sure that you have an extensive list on that question, please.
Right. I'm going to go ahead and get back with you then, Marcel. I'll go ahead and defer to our President-elect Sean
Okay,
Block.
so the supplemental list I have here.
Okay, very good. Number 1 on our list, please. And I'll go ahead and direct that question to be answered first by Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero. Thank you.
Okay. Still experiencing, give me one more minute, technical difficulty, but there you go. These are confusers, not computers. Supplemental. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to pull it up, Peggy, on my phone, so you can just read it.
I can go ahead and ask it. I can do it.
Okay, okay, Monty, please. Thank you.
Number 7, political status.
No, number 1.
Number 1.
Yeah,
okay. Are there current laws that you believe are not useful and should be repealed? If yes, what are they?
I'm going to have to take a pass on that one because there's no way I could answer this question in 2 minutes. There are a ton of laws that need to be repealed.
What would be your primary, your number one or number two, maybe, top of your list?
My number one would be, God, where to begin? That's a good question. I'm in mental paralysis. I would have to say the number one would be the waste energy law. It would have to be totally rewritten because the way it exists now, we are costing taxpayers about $7 to $8 million a year on top of $100 million investment. And if the law was rewritten to make sense, because the way the law is written right now, it was a pork barrel project. In fact, if you go all the way back to the beginning of this law, it's totally illegal. And the fact that we're still in court after nearly 20 years, spending taxpayers' money defending in a lawsuit where nobody exists. There's no company, there's no partnership, there's no officers, there's not even a contract. But every year we're spending tens of thousands of dollars going through hearings and motions on a contract that doesn't exist, from plaintiffs that don't exist, representing a company that doesn't exist, trying to extort $20 million out of taxpayers, kind of like Guam YTK. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, this is another 20-minute answer.
Thank you, Mr. Leon Guerrero. I appreciate that. I'd like to ask Senator Moylan for the same question, please.
Sure. We just did the Budget Act, and one of the things that is mandated again previous year and this fiscal year also is something called the Pacific Island Development Bank. It's $1 million investment that we continue to do. It's nice to have. It's not that it's a bad thing, but it's not the right timing for it. We should be focusing our economy on Guam's economy and saving some money. We also have some departments that we discussed that we could reorganize, but something like the Washington Liaison Office, that could be budgeted elsewhere or not necessary at this time too. We also have antiquated laws that I think should be looked at, like our government travel laws as well, and reorganization of the government too. We should definitely look at that too. It's just a few of the things that I can think of, and if I'm back in the 36th Guam legislature, I think I'll be quite busy. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. I'd like to ask the same of Senator Torres, please.
The one bill that comes to mind is the chemical castration bill, which I thought was the stupidest thing we ever passed. One, because it doesn't address the underlying problems with violence. It's unenforceable. It's not even affordable for the people that would be required to do it. And it's not effective if you don't take the medicine. So that's one bill that I think is just so pathetic that we even have in our books in these modern ages, and I would get rid of right away. I also think that there are some agencies in the government that can be taken away. For example, and no anybody. Is that my time?
No. Go ahead.
Agencies like Bureau of Women's Affairs, when women head the government in many facets, number one. And then even things like services for certain clients that really should be borne by insurance companies or other private companies and not the government necessarily. So, but in terms of a law, top of the line, chemical castration, just get rid of it. It's ridiculous and it's just stupid at this point.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Next question, I will defer to Mr. Bobby Sashdej on this to ask, and we will ask Mr. Frank Bloss to answer this question first, please.
After again. So I'm going to give a little precursor to this question. As you know, this question is in regards to the doubling of property taxes levied on improvements on land property valued at $1 million or more. okay? And before answering this question, Mr. Blas, I would like to kind of give a predecessor of explaining of what impact it has had thus far, especially to landlords that own apartments or commercial buildings that have pre-existing contracts that they're unable to negotiate or adjust. So therefore, they've had to eat those costs. And for those that don't have those pre-existing contracts, they've ultimately passed that cost further down to their tenants or to their customers. So ultimately, this $1 million or more doubling of the property taxes has caused the general public, not necessarily for the long term, the property owners, the expense. So I wanted to ask your thoughts on that, and will you support legislation that will repeal the increase in doubling of property taxes levied on improvements on land property valued at $1 million or more?
I support legislation that repeals taxes, period. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative. I firmly believe that the less government involvement that it has in the line of business, the better. You go back to when you were talking about that question. Let's go back to what Ken Yongoro presented earlier. Okay, he stayed in an apartment that several years ago was $500 a month. Today, that apartment is $1,300. Okay, and then there was only two coats of paint and a door change. That was it, and it increased the value of that property. Okay, so when you're looking at, first off, I think that $1 million value, that $1 million figure, was an arbitrary figure. Unfortunately, a lot of times government has a way of just presenting regulations, rules, legislation, fees, whatever, with arbitrary figures. There is really no thought process into it. Why $1 million? And what is the difference between that $1 million $1,001 property to that $999,999 property? So when you do that, what was it for? Is it so that you can separate the rich from the poor, the elitist from the non? I didn't think it. Okay, so no, yes, I do. I will support the repeal of that, and any other taxes and fees that we want. Granted, yes, there's a process and there's an assessment that needs to be done, but if it isn't necessary and there was really no justification for it, it shouldn't exist.
Thank you, Mr. Blas. I'd like to ask the same of Senator Moylan, please.
Was that me? Is that? I'm
That's
sorry, I
correct.
didn't. Okay. That measure came on the 35th Guam Legislature session floor. It was introduced on the 34th. Because it was written poorly, it had to come back onto session floor for a correction to add the word "and more" to it. I voted no on that. How in the world can you? Those taxes were already paid, and then you say, oh, you had to pay. Basically, you double the taxes, and you had to pay it effective as of last year. Well, what if I sold my property? How do I recoup for all these expenses? There was no care for that, for that passage of this bill. And what did that bill do? It raised maybe $8 million. And then what ended up happening was the FY19 budget said we're $30 million over our projections. We had excess revenue, for crying out loud, right? And the governor is the one that wants to spend it all, but there's no talk about reducing taxes on the people that are generating the corporate tax and the employees withholding tax. We are not a business-friendly environment, and I think that really has to change. I would repeal this law definitely, and look at the other things we discussed earlier about how to right-size our government and public-private partnership so we can reduce our taxes and help our small businesses. That's my answer to that. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'd like to ask the same of Mr. Dominic Hernandez.
Thank you. I would be in support to repeal it. My common thing is I want to help everybody for the common good of all. It shouldn't matter whether you're rich, middle class, or poor. The taxes percentage-wise should be relatively the same or around the same, and shouldn't be double just because you got $1 million property, now your tax is double. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to my eyes. And I'm not sure why they may have done it or what was the purpose for it exactly, but I don't agree with it, and I would be support to repeal it. And as well, like you said, by doubling the taxes, especially on $1 million property, now you're looking at apartments, complexes, condos, and so forth that are going to rent out to people, but they got to increase the rent just because they have to pay these extra taxes because it's double now because it's over $1 million property. That's why I'm for repealing it. I will support it because to me, it just doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. So we have one more question on the floor before I turn it over to Chairman John Duenas to wrap it up, and then perhaps a closing remark from our president. I will call on our panelist, Mr. Monty McDowell, to please ask number 6.
Number 6.
Number 6.
Let me just mention a couple things before I really ask the question. But back in 2002, the Judiciary of Guam, the presiding judge and Liz Barrett Anderson, I think they came over to the Chamber of Commerce and met with the board. I was a member of the board at that time, and they asked us to support and be part of a brand new program they were starting, which was the Adult and Juvenile Drug Court. At that time, I wasn't a big fan of it because I thought there was another government trying to pull us in and we're going to do all the work. A year later, I became a fan of it when I saw the enormity of the drug problem in Guam. And so for the past 18 years, I personally participated in my time with the drug courts and still do to this day. We have a tremendous amount of people in both the adult, family, and juvenile that come in the door, go through the process, and come back out and have the opportunity to get back on the right road and be productive members to our Guam economy and to themselves and to their families and to the village that they reside in. And without the drug court participation, I'm afraid these people would fall through the cracks and be basically derelicts in our community for pretty much their entire life. This is not a problem just to Guam. As I travel to Guam high school reunions in Las Vegas or whatever, and I mentioned our drug problem, they said they have it all over the United States in their jurisdiction. But I'm worried, and I'm Guam centric, and I hate to see our people and a population devastated by drugs. So the question here is, how do you plan to address the drug abuse on the island?
I'd like to ask Senator Tai Tagui to be the first to answer this question, please.
Good afternoon, Monty. Good to see you. And thank you, by the way. I just want to thank you with all my heart for stepping up to the plate and being a part of the drug court scenario and contributing. I don't know if there's any good enough solution to this, horrible epidemic, but I'm open to redirecting public funds to help any agency and community programs provide the necessary support individuals need with drug abuse. I also think that schools, especially in the primary years, can serve a critical role in helping to deter bad habits, including drug abuse, as well as alcohol addiction as well. The earlier responsible individuals, can intervene in a child's life, I believe, to make better choices and discourage them from any wrongdoings going forward. So I really think that this area should start at a younger age, to put out that whole, remember when I think it was Ronald Reagan's wife, Nancy Reagan, just say no. I think we need to bring that back. We're forgetting that. So thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. And again, thank you, Monty, for stepping up to the plate for our community as well.
Appreciate that.
Senator Tai Tagui, I'd like to ask Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero to answer this as well, please.
For years now, I have been arguing for more detection assets. because we only have 4 ports of entry for drugs on this island: the International Airport, Anderson Air Force Base, Commercial Port, and the Mail. And if we dramatically increase detection efforts at those 4 locations, we can dramatically reduce the supply of drugs on this island. But for some reason, politicians have been reluctant to take $200,000 to $300,000 that it would take to purchase, train, and equip 30 drug dog detection teams. But they're willing to set aside $400,000 to pay to provide an all-expense week in Hawaii for our craftsmen. They're reluctant to increase drug detection to make our people safe, but they're willing to spend $300,000 on a conference at the Dusatani, bringing people over, telling us how wonderful independence will be for Guam. So when it comes to keeping our people safe, the actions of our politicians speak so loud, I can't hear a word that most of them say. Because for most of the politicians in office right now and in ADLOOP and in the different agencies, 10 brand new executive level cars at almost $500,000 was more important to this administration than drug detection dogs. 20 4K 65-inch colored TVs are more important to this administration than drug detecting dogs. So it's a question of priorities. My priority as a senator would be to dramatically increase detection efforts. At the same time, we dramatically increase recovery efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Leon Guerrero. I'll ask the same of Senator Torres, please.
Yes, Monty, I've seen you at those drug court graduations, and you are a good man. Thank you for all you do. With regard to what I've done directly to help with the drug situation, there's a bill right now that I'm hoping gets on the floor for a vote, which would update the manifest reporting for Guam, make it not only a quicker timeline for cargo that's coming either through air or through sea, but it's done electronically, and it will require them to be in compliance with the federal regulations right now for declaration of things. This bill was developed with Customs and Quarantine and the Coast Guard with 2 things in mind. One, how to intercept drugs and illegal substances coming into Guam, and also how do you account for goods that require proper taxation. So that bill, the manifest bill, will help with the drug curbing. Other things that I've done just to help with victims themselves who are overcoming their drug issues is a fair chances hiring practice that will allow people who have done their restitution to apply for jobs and meet that first, get through at least consideration. Other things I've done to help people is also IDs for people who are homeless, who don't, and homelessness is many things. It's not having a permanent roof over your head. I'm also working on policy with public health, Department of Behavioral Health, for commitment of people, civil commitments of people who have problems, whose family members want them to be assessed and get treatment. So I have many levels, not only from how to intercept the drugs at the borders, how to deal with people that want to be reintegrated into the system, but also how do you deal with people who are presently in need of evaluation and services. So drug addiction, alcohol addiction, big problems, I agree, but if we approach it from many different angles, we will make an impact. And I believe that a lot of the bills that I've done have made an impact on that very demographic. Thank you.
Senator. Thank you very much. Now, before I defer it back to our chairman, John, after which Mr. John Duenas will do a wrap up, and then everybody, all our candidates will be given up to 2 minutes to do their closing remarks. And once again, in your closing remarks, just for memory's sake, please state your name once again and include why you believe that you are deserving of the Realtors vote. So after that, President Claire would like to apologize that we will not be able to join during our closing, but our President-elect Sean will do the closing remarks thereafter. So I'll defer it to you now, Mr. John Duenas.
Thank you, Peggy. Docomo decided to work on our internet a few minutes ago and knocked me out, but I'm back. Thank you very much, candidates. I think being the first day of the screening, I think we did quite well, and I really appreciate your honesty and your answers to the questions. And unfortunately, it's difficult to have a dialogue because the way this thing is set up. But I really want to thank you sincerely for your participation, and good luck to everybody. I think got a really strong candidates here that we hope can make it into the next legislature. So back to you.
We'll start with Senator Mary Torres.
Thank you again to the Guam Association of Realtors for this wonderful conversation with you today. My name is Mary Camacho Torres. I'm on the Republican ballot, number 5. And I just want to remind everyone how in my term as a senator and also in my stint working for the government, I've always been that voice of reason. That person who's fought for the unqualified government hiring, for fair chances employment, for leave laws for families. I've also been a great advocate for the vulnerable, providing safe havens for our children and homes for foster kids and identification for our elderly and our homeless people. I've also been that voice for progress. A lot of the modernization, not only of our voting registration laws, but and government efficiencies and with driver's licenses and renewals. But I'm also focused on what it is that's going to make us a stronger island. How do we strengthen our borders with our manifest laws? Championing legislation that addresses not only the victims and the vulnerable, but how do we shore up our system, modernize it, and get it to a point where it's efficient and sensible. But I ask for your continued support just to bring that level of dignity back to our healthcare provisions, to our workforce environments, and to how we lead our island, how we leaders connect with you and address the issues that are important to you. I believe that I'm that voice, and I humbly ask for your continued trust as a senator in the legislature. Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Senator Torres. I'd like to ask Mr. Dominique Hernandez, please.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you to the Guam Association of Realtors for allowing me this opportunity to come on and speak during this forum and answer your questions. I'm Dominic J. Hernandez. I'm number 3 on the ballot under the Republican Party. And I come again with that sense of being a common person and trying to do make Guam better for the common good of all. There are many of us out there that are suffering. I'm part of it. I'm part of that 36,000 plus that is on the PUA. As well, I've had many friends that are business owners who are also struggling just to survive and don't even know they're going to make it by next year. And I want to push to get the help out there so that we can move forward and progress forward so we can build a better future, and not just for ourselves, but for our family and for our children, most especially. I know the crisis has really hit us in multiple ways, and it's hurt us in many different ways, but we can get through this together. We all desire a change and a difference, but the change and difference, it doesn't start with us candidates coming out necessarily and speaking about our platforms and everything, but it starts with you as a voter to decide who you think is the best person for that choice. And I hope that every voter out there does choose for the person they believe will make that change and difference that we all desire for our island, for the better of our future for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I'd like to ask Senator Tello Tadegui, please, to go next.
Tijismasi Tagar, and thank you, Peggy, for the opportunity. Everyone here, John, Marcel, I saw Roland de Guzman, good to see you, Monty, Ray. I hope I did, and Sean, thank you so much for us being here today. When I opened up, I didn't give you pretty much what I've been doing, but I want to give you a background of myself. Of course, my name is Telo Taidigui. I'm originally from the village of Inarahan, so I'm a Southern girl, but I've been residing in Tumuning. So I have both the South and the North, you know, I got that covered on both sides. And I attended GW, and I went to the university for a short time, and then I attended Fayetteville Community College in the paralegal program. I've been an insurance agent for property and casualty for a couple years. I own 2 small businesses. I was a director of the Women's Bureau, as well as the deputy general manager of the Guam Visitors Bureau. I've also worked as a special assistant to Governor Calvo, external affairs, and in GITA, working with the military buildup with Robert Crisostomo. So that's a little bit of a background of who I am and where I've been. And now moving forward, I've taken all those experiences and put them into, I'm hoping, good legislation that the people of Guam can see the hard work I've done. But I think I'm not a person with a lot of words. I'm the kind of person who wants to get the job done. You know, who goes out there, does the research, listen to the people of Guam, hear what they have to say, and take that and do something good for the people. There is so much more I have on my plate right now, especially in a time of crisis like this, that we need people who are going to bring the jobs back. We need someone who's going to work on our healthcare facilities and build those back up again. So with that, I humbly ask for your vote of confidence in me to continue to do what I'm doing. And that is, you know, screaming out to the government, you know, to this administration to bring in transparency and accountability, and do that for the legislature as well. So thank you so much. My name is Telo Taidigui. I'm number 11 on the ballot.
Thank you. Next one is Mr. Frank Bloss, please.
Well, first off, thank you very much to the Guam Association of Realtors for giving us the opportunity, giving me the opportunity to have this conversation with you. I was humbled and I learned a lot, not just from my fellow colleagues, the candidates for the 36th Guam legislature, but from all of you, and to listen to your concerns and to give us the opportunity to be able to provide our ideas. You know, I started off my career as a police officer, and I worked drug enforcement for a long time. I know the drug problem. I lived it. I got out of the police department because I was tired of getting shot at. I didn't want my family to continue to live the way they had to live while I enforced the laws. I know ways to be able to deal with our drug problem. As a business owner, I've gone through and I continue to go through the struggles that we have in being able to operate and maintain businesses. I've seen the struggles of other businesses who come into my business to look for help. As a former legislator and as a former member of the executive branch, I know the processes. I know what it's like to be able to have to enforce those mandates and how to build those mandates. I want to bring those experiences back because of all the experiences, of all the positions that I've had, that I continue to have in my life. I think my best position that I have is being Papa. I'm Papa to, wonderful, my daughters, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. It's their future. It's the future of our children that I'm very much concerned with. This is a pivotal time in our lives here on Guam. Okay, we're going through right now an unprecedented, unforeseen, unprepared pandemic that has really affected our lives. This gives us an opportunity to be able to reset, to rebuild, so that we can rebound. I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to ensure that there is life. After the pandemic, there is life that continues on, not just for my kids, but for your kids as well. My name is Frank Bloss Jr. I'm number 4 on the Republican side of the ballot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bloss. And I will go ahead and have Senator Moylan say his closing remarks.
Thank you. My priorities are no different than when I started in 2018. And I hit the ground running back then when I first started. And I'm still going to focus on economic recovery and also on public safety And after this first term, I now more know the importance of also focusing on transparency. I'll make sure that that would happen too if I'm elected back into the 36th Guam legislature. So I want to say thank you very much to the Guam Association of Realtors, and I also want to ask those listening and get out the word again to please go out and vote early and contact the Guam Election Commission to schedule an appointment. So your vote does count, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero.
I'm Ken Leon Guerrero. On the ballot, number 9 on the Republican side is Joaquin Leon Guerrero, but better known as Ken. For the past 12 years, it has been my honor to be a community advocate. I consider that a sacred trust and one that has filled me with, I can't even describe the feeling I have when I've been serving the people of Guam in that capacity. The past 12 years have gotten me deep into the bowels, if you will, of government of Guam. And I got into where the machines are all coming together and working together. And I have seen how the risk of moral hazard has damaged our government badly, has destroyed the trust our people once had in our government and our elected officials. Because when government officials use government assets and use the government itself as a giant ATM machine, it is the people who suffer. Right now, 1 in 5 tax dollars goes to paying debt service. It doesn't go into providing services to the people of Guam. And the reason it goes to debt service is because too many of our politicians have borrowed the future from our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren in an effort to make decisions that didn't cost them anything, but will cost taxpayers for generations to come. And as a senator, I am hoping to get into the legislature and help stop pork barrel politics. Because every time money is diverted away from the common good into private hands for private profits with no public payback, all the people of Guam suffer. And that's why I made the decision to shift my focus from community advocate to senator, where I could stand on the floor of the legislature and serve the people in a different function.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero. With that, I'd like to thank again all our participants, our members who have joined us, our panelists, our legislative committee headed by our chairman, John Duenas. And to close, I will defer to our president-elect, Mr. Sean Block.
Half a day, everybody. Candidates, again, thank you very much for this small donated amount of time. I hope that that the answers to the questions that we had asked you will help all of our members to have better insight on who they wish to support and vote for. Hopefully it's you, and hopefully as soon as you guys get in there, you start making a difference to align your goals with ours. Wish you all luck. To the attendees, the over 30 some attendees that are still in, I want to stress the importance of voting. It is very important that we exercise our right to vote. We asked all of these candidates who again donated their time, all the questions that are very important to us, which include, would they support us being essential? With all the answers that they gave, I think that we can confidently go to the booths and place our vote. And if we don't do that, then we wasted their time and we wasted your time in you sitting there. So make sure to get out there and vote. GAR doesn't only stand for Guam Association of Realtors, it also stands for Great and Ready, because we're always great and ready in all that we do, including supporting our community and our members. So let's get out there and vote. Again, panelists, candidates, and everybody that attended, thank you very much. I applaud all of you. All right, have a great one, guys.
Thank you very much. Have a very pleasant day, folks.
Jujus Masi, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Peggy,
Yes.
I can help, not tomorrow, but Thursday and Friday, but I looked at my calendar and I have a commitment tomorrow.
Sure.
Can you
I
find
think,
a
yeah.
replacement?
Yes, I think it worked out well. John, are you okay with how the process was today with leading to the next panelist and the candidate to answer it? Did you find that smooth? Oh, you're muted. You're muted, John. You're muted.
I thought you did a great job, Peggy. I like the way it flowed. At least after the first two questions, we kind of got bogged down a little bit. But hey, everybody did a great job and, you know, said the right things. And Sean, thank you for reminding people that, you know, voting is very important and that their vote counts. And if you don't vote, then maybe you can't complain.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right. By the way, I asked Claire earlier too, and I texted you too, just for your FYI. I'm sharing the information with the media. I'm not letting them in particularly, but I'm just sharing the schedule just so they know what we're doing, and if they wish to interview any of you later on, at least you're aware, okay? So I'm sharing the information with the media on that one. Thank you. Thank you, folks.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
the
See you tomorrow.
Yes, bye.
Bye.